Introduction. Holes begins when Stanley Yelnats gets accused of stealing a famous pair of baseball shoes. Stanley and his father always blamed his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather for any misfortune in their lives because he supposedly had a curse put on himself and his descendants. When in court, Stanley was given a choice of punishment: jail or Camp Green Lake. Camp Green Lake is a work camp for boys who have gotten in trouble with the law and have to dig one hole every day in order to build character. Rising action. When Stanley arrives at Camp Green Lake, he is greeted by Mr. Sir, the camp warden, Mr. Pendanski, the camp counselor, and his work group. Mr. Sir tells Stanley that this is not a Girl Scout camp and, quote, "If you dig up anything interesting, you are to report it to me or any other counselor." Mr. Sir explains that every day Stanley would have to dig one hole as deep and wide as his shovel, which was 5 feet long. Rising action. While digging his hole one day, Stanley finds something unusual. It was a cylinder with the letters KB engraved in a heart. The small golden cylinder is given to Mr. Pendanski, which gives it to the warden, who is astonished with this finding. He then makes the boys dig all around Zigzag's hole in hopes of finding something more. Rising action. Later on at the camp, Zero catches Stanley writing a letter to his mom. Zero informs Stanley that he never learned how to read and learns that his real name is Hector Zeroni. Stanley and Zero come up with an agreement that every day Zero will dig part of Stanley's hole in exchange for reading lessons. When the other boys noticed their arrangement, they were very upset and often mocked Stanley and Zero. Rising action. Stanley recalls that after his great-grandfather was robbed by Kissing Kate Barlow, he took refuge in the hot desert on a place he called God's Thumb. When Stanley was digging his hole one day, he was able to make out something in the distance that looked to him exactly like a giant fist, with the thumb sticking straight up. Rising action. The warden learns that Stanley has been teaching Zero how to read. He then began to ask Zero how to spell juvenile words, and Zero would simply not respond. In frustration, he took off with his shovel and ran away from the camp. The warden, Mr. Sir, and Mr. Pendanski thought Zero was as good as dead since there is no water for miles and decided to delete any files that related to Hector Zeroni. Rising action. A few days later, Stanley builds up the courage to leave Camp Green Lake to look for Zero. After stealing the water truck and walking miles in the scorching sun, Stanley finds Zero underneath a boat named Mary Lou and eating what tastes like peaches, which Zero had named Sploosh. Zero and Stanley agree that the only way they were going to continue to exist is if they went to God's Thumb. Rising action. After an exhausting hike up the mountain, Zero and Stanley make it to the protruding rock. Barely able to stand on their feet, they not only find water by digging a hole, but they find hundreds of sweet onions. Zero is greatly fatigued, so Stanley decides to comfort him with a song that... Climax. Stanley and Zero make it to the hole where Stanley had the instinct that something of value is hidden beneath the dirt. They take turns digging until they find a suitcase. The excitement barely sinks in when they see Mr. Sir, Mr. Pendanski, and the warden watching over them. They are about to climb out of the hole when several yellow-spotted lizards cover their bodies. Unable to move without disturbing the yellow-spotted lizards, Stanley and Zero have to sit in the hole until they both get bitten and die or the yellow-spotted lizards leave. Hours go by and everyone is beginning to lose their patience. A government official and a woman, who is Stanley's lawyer, make their way to Camp Green Lake and witness Stanley and Zero covered by yellow-spotted lizards. The warden claims that they are holding onto her suitcase. However, the suitcase says Stanley Yelnats on it. With courage, Stanley decides to stand up ever so slowly and make his way out of the hole. The yellow-spotted lizards jump off of him, and Zero soon follows suit. Stanley's lawyer explains that the judge revoked Stanley's sentence because of evidence that Stanley was at the school the time the shoes were stolen. Before Stanley leaves, he asks if Zero can leave with him, and when Stanley's lawyer asks for Zero's files, they are nowhere to be found. Therefore, Zero was able to leave Camp Green Lake. Falling action. As it turns out, Zero, or Hector Zeroni, was the great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni, the woman who had put a curse on Stanley's family. When Stanley carried Zero up the mountain and sang the song to him, the curse was broken. Resolution. Stanley was able to open the suitcase, and although there were not a lot of jewels inside, there were many important documents worth thousands of dollars. Stanley gave some of it to Zero, who was able to find his mother with the money. Stanley's dad ended up creating an invention to prevent old sneakers from smelling. He named his invention Sploosh.